Welcome to the weekly SNCFL stream here at SimNation. I'm Darren, and this is the stream for the week of ending 4/25. For those of you who tried to tune in yesterday, I apologize. I did not stream because I had some things come up, but what I wanted to do is kind of bring you up to speed as the SNCFL season starts to wind down with where we are and some of the stories that have developed over the course of the season, as well as kind of just talk in general about the league and what's going on. For those of you who may not remember, SNCFL is a draft day sports college football 21 league. Of course, Draft Day Sports is a title from Wolverine Studios. I would encourage all of you to go out there and take a look. It's a really good brand and a really good game. They also have pro basketball, college basketball, pro football. I think they have golf as well. So it's really worth looking at. The developers are very responsive. Quick shout out to Brooks. He has always been pretty much on top of things. And then one of the league members, of course, here is OK Bandit, who helped contribute to building this product. So that's another good reason to look at it. Bandit is top notch, and I highly recommend it. So where are we? We're now on the cusp of week 15, which is the final week of the regular season. Week 16, of course, will be conference championships, then we'll move into bowl games, and then the playoffs will begin. So by the next time that I stream, which will be coming Saturday, we will have finished the conference championship. We will be past bowl games, and the first round of the playoffs will have run. So kind of the storylines, no shock, is our top 25. There's not a lot of things here that stand out to me that are shocking. Maryland is currently number one. Of course, Maryland is one of my teams who has a powerhouse in this league. No shock that at number two you have Max in Alabama. Alabama under Max, he's restored them back to the state that they were under Doc. So great job there, Max. Number three is Clemson, which is Matt's team. Again, no shock there. Clemson is a perennial powerhouse. Central Florida is under CPU control, but they're a perennial top 10 team. It's not really shocking to see them there. What is a shock is Texas State. Now, the story behind Texas State, they were my team up until this season when I left them to go coach at Texas San Antonio. And I guess it's just the CPU showing me that it's a much better coach than I am. So they're ranked number 5. They're undefeated, if memory serves me correctly, and they likely are in the playoffs at this point. Baylor is at number 6. This, of course, is one of Skelter's teams. Not really a shock to see them at number 6. Actually, the shock may be that they're not ranked higher, but they've had a couple setbacks here or there. James is doing a great job with Texas A&M, who comes in at number 7. Texas A&M got a big win this week with their win over Washington State, which helped catapult them. They're not going to be in the conference championship game for the SEC, just because an earlier season loss to Alabama. But there's no reason why they shouldn't make the playoffs unless they really take a nosedive or something in the last week or two, or the CPU just decides they don't like Texas A&M. Number 8 is California. California only has one loss. Some people have already said that's kind of shocking to see California ahead of people like Arizona, Arizona State, and of course the North leader, Washington State. Well, Washington State has 2 losses. So I don't think it's too much of a shock, though. Of course, Washington State lost to Texas A&M earlier in the week, but I'm not too shocked by that. Louisville is at number 9. They can still make it into the playoffs. They just need a couple things to fall their way. And then you have the Arizona teams, of course. Arizona's CPU, Arizona State is Gary. Gary has a chance of still making the playoffs. I think they can squeeze in with a couple things happening to other teams above them. Of course, they got to get past Arizona, and that's a big thing. Washington State could still make the playoffs. Of course, they are the North Division title holders already. They've got to win essentially the Pac-12 at this point, and then they need help. One, they need for something bad to happen to California. I don't know if that's possible. We'll look at that in a moment. A kind of a shock is at number 13 with Auburn. Auburn is typically a top 5 team. A couple setbacks here or there with Matt this season. I think one of them happened when he was without Powell. He lost a game. Another kind of shock is Louisiana Monroe. That's Skelter's other team. We'll talk about the recruiting situation at Louisiana Monroe because it's something that Wolverine Studios is going to have to fix. I don't think it's a major problem. I think that constructively they can fix it. It's just when you look at Louisiana Monroe, they're not a team that should be struggling with recruiting, and they have no commits in 1 week 15. And they're a 77 prestige team. There's just no way that happens. So we'll talk through that a little bit more. Again, there's some ideas floating around, and I try to be constructive. I have some ideas about what the problem is. I know that Skelter has done some things that maybe were a little bit questionable that resulted in the 0 commits, but there's not a way that they would be at 0 commits in week 15 unless there's something going on behind the scenes with the code. So I'll give you a couple of my ideas and take it for what it is. I'm not the programmer of this game. OK Bandit actually is. He knows the recruiting very well. He's weighed in on this multiple times, and I tend to trust OK because he's never left me wrong. And he's a CS:GO fan, so you got to trust a CS:GO fan. 15 is UNLV. Of course, the story with UNLV is that was Bandit's team at the beginning of the season due to some issues with not really the code of recruiting. It had to do with the fact they were left on human control all last season, and as a result, they didn't have any players. Shock is that they're at number 15. I can only imagine what would have happened if Bandit had actually been coaching them. And then just rounding out at number 19, Michigan, they'll be higher. They've got a really good coach, and he's going to get them going. I'm pretty confident of that. And then, of course, I think that's really it no, I'm sorry. Almost forgot Caesar. So Memphis is at number 20. That is a really good rank for Caesar. I think he's only in like his second season with Draft Day Sports. He is a bowl-bound college football veteran. And when I say veteran, he's a champion. He's won multiple championships. So him at number 20 is a good thing to see. He's grabbing this game very quickly, and he's really doing well with it. So if we kind of move in, I'm going to go standings, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the players. Then I'm going to talk about the recruiting situation because we really got to talk about that. So most conferences are done. Conference championships are already lined up. And, of course, it's 2 sims away. It'll be Clemson versus Virginia. No real shock, though. Duke, well, let me rephrase. It is a shock. Duke kind of blew it in the end. And I think, if I remember correctly, Duke lost to Virginia. But Clemson's not a shock. Louisville, again, has a very strong chance of making the playoffs because they don't play again until bowls or playoffs, which means that any of the teams above them lose, and there's a chance of that, then Louisville likely makes it in. Now, if Clemson loses, they're not making it in. Clemson is in regardless of what happens. Unless they lose to South Carolina, and let's be honest, that's not going to happen in this league. I used to live in South Carolina, side story, and I'll tell you that in South Carolina, you're either a Gamecock fan or you're a Tiger fan. I'm a Terrapin fan. So I refuse to choose either of the two, but if I had to choose, I'd choose the Gamecocks over the Tigers. Just not a big fan of Clemson. Mostly because I'm a Maryland fan, and Maryland used to be in the ACC, and therefore I don't like Clemson. But I will say in this case, Matt should win that game pretty easily. And when he does, that will just sink him into the playoffs. It's just now a matter of what seed he is. Um, Generally speaking, you don't want to be a 6, 7, or 8 seed. You're going to end up against one of the top teams. And right now, that would be Maryland, Alabama, or Clemson. Not a good place to be. Now, your hope is one of them loses, and then if that happens, you don't want to be in the 4, 5, or 6 seed. So it'll work itself out. But other big game is we'll talk about Florida later. Has his end of year game against Florida State. I think he should win that one, and then the other games just don't matter. When you look at the ACC, again, another thing that I'd like to see fixed is the offensive leaders never will have a running back. That's not really good because in Clemson's case, one of their top players is a running back. And in fact, he's probably one of the top players in the nation. So right now, Calvin Weinel he's one of the tops in the nation, if I remember correctly. Touchdown-wise, Wiley Lewis out of UVA is another one. Recruiting-wise, Clemson just killing it. That's normal for Clemson. They are having a really good season. I think the only team, potentially two teams doing better recruiting-wise than them right now is Alabama, who I won't be shocked if they're number one again. It'll be second season in a row for Max. He's really doing good in recruiting. And then Maryland is another one who's up there. So be Clemson versus Virginia. I'd be shocked if Virginia beats Clemson. If they do, it'll cause all hell to break loose. Now, the beauty of this league is, unlike bowl bound, it's an 18 playoff. It doesn't matter whether you win your conference or not. It's by ranking. So you could win your conference and still not make it into the playoffs. When we talk about the bowl bound college football leagues or 16-team playoff, all 10 conference champions make it into the playoffs, and then 6 at-large bids. This is essentially every team is an at-large bid. Now, of course, you want to win your conference championship because it helps solidify your position. American Athletic, we talked about Central Florida. Really, really happy to see that Caesar pulled out the West Championship. So, no big games here. From a human perspective, of course, the big games for CPU. But number 4 Central Florida versus number 20 Memphis, that'll be a really good conference championship game. Personally, I'm hoping that Caesar upsets Central Florida. I think he has the ability to do it. He's doing a really good job there. Really top quarterback in the nation this year is probably between Jesus Metz, 4,400 yards, 44 touchdowns, and Matthew Bennell out of UCF, 4,300 yards, 43 touchdowns. So Tulsa or UCF, one of those two is likely going to be the Davey O'Brien Award winner. Not going to really talk about recruiting, but it is really good to see that Caesar got a 4-star defensive end out of Tennessee. So that's a really good get for him. Houston and Central Florida, of course, are leading in recruiting. Big 12. So Big 12 title game, again, it's a flat conference. Top 2 teams play each other on the conference title. So it'll be Texas Christian versus Baylor. I think TCU actually, I'll take a look. I'm trying to remember if TCU actually beat Baylor earlier in the season. I should know this, but I don't research this before, and they did. So I expect Skelter to try to get revenge. He can't afford to lose the title game. If he does, Baylor will likely not make it into the playoffs, and it'll be one of the few seasons ever in this league that Skelter is not part of the playoffs. So my money is going to be on Baylor winning it. For TCU, it's just about bowl placement at this point. There's no way they make the playoffs. And then really outside of that, there's not much still. Eugene Wade didn't probably do as good as he probably could have. He probably, if we look at pro prospects, he's probably the number 1 prospect coming out as a senior quarterback this season to go into the WWPF. he's just got great skills. He was the number one player out of high school. He probably took a step back when I left Oklahoma, but he probably could have done a lot better. When you look at it, Baylor has really started to come on in recruiting. They've got a 5-star and a couple 4-stars. Don't worry about the positions. Scouter moves his people around. A defensive end could end up as a tight end. A free safety could end up as a running back. He loves moving people around, and it's one of the reasons why he's successful, candidly. So, Big 12, Baylor versus Texas Christian. My money's on Baylor. When we look at the Big 10, Maryland won the conference weeks ago. They play Rutgers. It'll be the final conference game. They always end with Rutgers. It's a trap game for them because they're already looking to the conference championships. They want to cement that number 1 seed, so they don't want to lose to Rutgers. If they lose to Rutgers, they're probably still in the playoffs, but it could drop them really quickly down in rankings. They, of course, play Purdue, who weeks ago I said I thought that Purdue would be here. It's kind of a shock. It just shows how far the West has fallen with Skelter leaving Minnesota, Rouse out of Iowa. I forget who was at Wisconsin. Could have been Frankie. But it just really opened up that West to where they're just beating on each other, and there's no one that's really holding up there. Michigan had a really good season again. They got a coach halfway through the season, not probably a little bit less than halfway. Rick, he's learning the game. It's a different title than what he's used to at Ohio State. I expect them to bounce back pretty good next year. And then, of course, Penn State is Don. Don didn't have much to work with this season, so 4-7 is actually a good record for them. I know if he was actually in Happy Valley, they'd probably be burning his house down right about now. But when we look at the recruiting in the Big Ten, a lot of Maryland that you see, some Michigan. Michigan got a 5-star, and then Nebraska, and of course Ohio State got one as well. When we look at the offensive leaders, again, this is the running back thing. The best player probably in the Big Ten right now are running backs. They're just not going to show. Don should get by Michigan State. That'll give him 5 wins. He's not going to go to a bowl this year. Maryland should get by Rutgers. Michigan should. Ohio State will be a really good game. So if the both actually fans of those two teams, I didn't take this personally. Michigan, I think, will win this one. They just have a better team this year. But again, I think next year the race in the East is going to be a lot tighter. Maryland won't be able to run away with it like they normally do. So looking forward to that. Conference USA, I will just start by saying Louisiana Tech had a great season, definitely deserved to be there. Marshall had a great season, definitely deserved to be there. The 3 human teams in this league did not do as well as maybe they wanted to. Me at UTSA, just horrible season. UTSA is another one of those teams with no recruits, but I mean, they're the worst team in the league prestige-wise. It makes sense. I'm going to be recruiting 2 stars. If there were 1 stars, I'd probably be having a struggle to get them recruited as well. I do think that of the teams, Old Dominion had a pretty good season. They just didn't do as good in conference play. They upset a lot of big names throughout the season. 6-6 is good. He's going to a bowl. That's Skelter's team. James Madison, first real season for SOA. He's got some good recruits coming in. So I think he'll be fine next year, and I think he'll actually compete, so will Skelter at Old Dominion. UTSA, don't expect them to compete for at least 3 seasons. No real games of note this week. But if you look at who's really doing well, again, running backs are not showing up, and there's a lot of stories around running backs. But Carlos Stark out of Florida Atlantic is probably the best offensive player right now. I think that's probably accurate. When we look at independents, Notre Dame is JC. maybe not quite the season he wanted. BYU, none of them really had a good season this year. I'm going to just move past this because other than to say, JC's done a really good job at recruiting. I think Notre Dame will be right up there next year, and should be in the hunt for a bowl bid. In the MAC, again, no shock, Northern Illinois, Akron is a shock because expected Bowling Green to be there, but Akron beat Bowling Green, so they had the game in hand, and that allowed them to essentially win it in direct competition. So I think Northern Illinois will beat Akron in the conference game. We'll see about that. I'm trying to remember if there was a human control team in this one, and I don't think that there is. Really, recruiting is Eastern Michigan. Looks like they're doing pretty good. So is Akron. They're the Zips, or the Z, as you see. Move on from the MAC, the Mountain West. In the Mountain West, the story again is UNLV. They shouldn't be there. Great season, and really a lot of that is the recruiting that OK did before he took his break and the really bad situation developed. Colorado State is not a shock. Colorado State is a really good team most years. I think they've got it right here. Thomas Smith is probably the offensive leader in this conference. 4,500 yards, 43 touchdowns. He's right up there with the other quarterbacks as potential Davey O'Brien Award winners. Boise State and Nevada are doing really good recruiting wise. So it should be interesting to see. I think UNLV beats Colorado State, which should set up Bandit well for his return to UNLV next season, because I don't think he's going to stay at Temple. So Washington State can still make the playoffs, but they got to beat Washington. They got to win the Pac-12 title. I think that they can beat Washington. It's a trap game because it's JC. JC is a good coach, so they'll have to be on their A game for this one. If they do win it, they got to win the next one, which will be against either Arizona State or Arizona. So if Gary beats Arizona, and he's at Arizona State is the Pac-12 South champion, which would be a good thing for Gary in his first season at Arizona State, which will create a very interesting championship game, because then both teams will need to win that game to make the playoffs. So you can expect an all-out attack between the two teams. Washington State, really good season. They are very run-oriented. Gary's more balanced at Arizona State, but he's got to still get by Arizona, and that's not an easy win, but I think he does. And again, one of the top players here is, of course, Preston Falcon, the quarterback out of Cal, over 4,000 yards, 44 touchdowns. Washington State has probably two running backs that are up there. And then recruiting-wise, it's Utah and USC. USC just had a horrible season this year. Probably shouldn't have been recruiting as good, but let's face it, when you in LA and just USC, right? I think the game just gets that. The Bandits probably giving them plus 20 recruiting because it's just USC. I'm kidding about that. I know he isn't, but Washington State at Washington. I expect Washington State hopefully to win this. Arizona at Arizona State. I think Arizona State wins this. I think your Pac-12 title game is a team from Arizona versus Washington State. It should be Arizona State. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say Gary wins that matchup, and Arizona State is probably your Pac-12 champion. If it's Arizona, I think Washington State wins, because I think they match up better against Arizona than they do against Arizona State. In the Southeastern, or the SEC, again, already determined. It'll be Alabama versus Missouri. Alabama's going to win that one very easily. Alabama's got to get past the trap game. That is Matt at Auburn. Max has had some issues with Matt. Matt is really hard to beat most seasons, so we'll see how that goes. Um, Outside of that, you have Clemson versus South Carolina. We talked about that. We talked about Florida versus Florida State. 6-5. Soa wants to win this to go to a decent bowl. Texas A&M at Arkansas. James should win that one easily. So I think that's the way it is. And of course, Bama's just killing it. They're doing great at just in general with the recruiting situation. Going to the final one, which is the Sun Belt, it is Texas State versus Louisiana Monroe. So Skelton needs to beat Texas State. If he can do that, then he'll be in great shape and be able to move on. So I am probably going to wrap this up early because I know my wife just got home and I need to help her with some things. But what I'm going to cover just real quickly is the awards, and then I am going to cut it short. And I will probably try to do a podcast on Tuesday and talk about the recruiting thing because I don't want to leave it out though. I'm trying to see here we are. So from an awards perspective, again, running backs really are not showing up, and it's just something that I don't even know how to talk about it because, like, you look at the Doak Wackle Award, right? There's no way that Julius Bryant is in the Doak Wackle consideration, considering the running backs that should be. So I think, again, you don't also see it in the Heisman. You don't see it in the most outstanding player. You don't the Bednarik. That's pretty wide open. My money's on Andre Parker, but let me just show you what I mean real quick. So no shock here. We talked about Thomas Smith. We talked about Jesus Metz and Matthew Bennell and Preston Falcon. All those are strong candidates for the Davey O'Brien Award. When we look at this, though, this is kind of what I'm talking about. Is you saw the league leaders, or the people who the computer was saying should win the award. Well, Aaron Daniels isn't there. Santiago Worthy's not there. Anthony Nance isn't there. David King is not there. Michael Higgins is not there. All these people, you would have to go way down the line before you have a single person that showed up on that league leaders. There's some logic there that's not working correctly that needs to be fixed. But and some people probably say, well, it's about touchdowns. Well, not really, because Littleton's not there, Blunt's not there, Nance isn't there, Dickinson's not there, Sanders is not there. All these guys should be there, period. So as we go into the future updates and stuff, I think this is one of those things that probably needs to be fixed. Is it's discounting running backs, and it's discounting the running backs who are actually doing well in these things, and it needs to be realistic because there's no way anybody on that Doak Wackle Award would compare it against any of the league leaders. So Wolverine, if you're listening to this, please fix that. There's not many things I think you have to fix. Recruiting is another one, but I got to cut this short because I did promise my wife I'd help her with something. So we'll talk about the recruiting thing in a different podcast. It's very important to talk about it because I want to give some constructive thoughts and talk about what I'm seeing and what I'm not. And I want to give whole attention to that because it's a big thing in this league, because if you don't get the recruiting right, you're not going to do well. So I'll focus on that next time. But for our next podcast, the conference championships will complete. So week 15 goes on Tuesday, week 16 conference championship on Thursday. Bowls will be on Saturday. That'll be when I do the next podcast. So bowls will just have completed. We'll know who's in the playoffs, and we'll be able to talk about that. So if you like this, follow it. It's on YouTube. It's on Twitch. I'll leave the address. Plus, we have Discord. And we'll go from there. So, again, thank you for your time tonight, and I hope that you have a great week. Thank you.